She spent 10 years alone in a foreign country and survived just fine. She came home to Mexico to be close to family, and the person who ended her life was already living inside her own house. Welcome back to Buried Truth Crime. Today, we're telling you the story of Vianca Moreno Labastida, a case that sat frozen for 7 years and 7 months while a grieving mother refused to let the file gather dust. What finally broke it open wasn't a lucky break for police. It was one woman's refusal to stop asking questions, stay until the end, because the answer to who did this only became public a few months ago, and it changes everything about how this story is usually told. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button now. We post a new case every single day, not once a week. So if stories like this one keep you up thinking about them, you're going to want to be here for the next one too. Let's start at the beginning, because to understand why this case matters, you have to understand who Vianca actually was. In February of 2018, Playa del Carmen looked like paradise to anyone passing through. White sand, turquoise water, the kind of town people move to when they want a clean slate. For 31-year-old Vianca Moreno Labastida, that clean slate had already cost her a decade of her life to build, and it was about to cost her everything else. Vianca was the only daughter of Vianca Yesenia Labastida Contreras, an attorney based in the city of Querétaro. Anyone who knew the two of them describes the same thing, a closeness that went far beyond the ordinary mother-daughter relationship. They spoke constantly. They trusted each other with almost everything. That bond is going to matter a lot later in this story, because it's the reason this case did not simply disappear. When Vianca was still a young woman, she made a bold decision. She left Mexico behind and moved to Spain, first landing in Madrid, before eventually settling in the coastal city of San Sebastian. She spent roughly 10 years building an entire adult life on another continent. She trained as a bartender. She built professional skills in mixology. She fell in love with a man she met there, and the two of them stayed together for close to 9 years. By any reasonable measure, Vianca had already proven she could build a life from nothing, far from home, with no safety net. That matters because it tells you exactly the kind of woman we're talking about. Not naive, not sheltered. A woman who had already survived a decade on her own in a foreign country. Eventually, she and her partner made the decision to leave Europe and start something new together, this time in Mexico, in the state of Quintana Roo, in the town of Playa del Carmen. She threw herself into building a life there, the same way she'd built one in Spain. In June of 2017, she graduated from a local university in the Riviera Maya with a degree in business administration. She was passionate about fitness, disciplined about her training, and she found work as a trainer at a local CrossFit gym. By every account available, Vianca was thriving. She had her degree, she had her career. She was rebuilding her independence in the country she'd left as a young woman. Then, in January of 2018, her long relationship came to an end. 9 years. Gone. She needed somewhere new to live, and like a lot of people in that exact situation, she made the most practical choice available to her. She moved into a shared home with a coworker from the gym, someone she already knew, someone she already trusted enough to live with. That single practical decision, the kind of decision thousands of people make every single day without a second thought, placed her inside a home with the person who, according to prosecutors 7 years later, would take her life. Now let's talk about the night everything changed. On the night of February the 21st, 2018, something happened inside that shared home, in a neighborhood called Bosque Real in Playa del Carmen. Vianca was attacked inside her own room, in the one place she should have been safest. Her roommate placed a phone call that night to Vianca's mother, hundreds of miles away in Querétaro. And according to what Vianca's mother has said publicly, in interview after interview in the years since, that phone call did not sound like it should have. There was no panic in the roommate's voice, no shaking, no struggle to get the words out, just a flat, almost rehearsed explanation. There'd been a break-in, she said. Vianca had a bloody nose. She was having a little trouble breathing. An ambulance was already involved, and a family member needed to get to the hospital because staff wouldn't share information with anyone else. Put yourself in the mother's position for a second. Your daughter is being taken away in an ambulance, hundreds of miles from where you're standing, and the person telling you about it sounds like she's reading you a grocery list. Vianca's mother has said repeatedly and on the record that this was the moment she knew something didn't add up. With no way to reach the coast quickly, she started calling everyone she could think of. Vianca's father, her former partner, anyone who might be physically closer. And for a stretch of that night, according to her account, almost nobody would pick up the phone. Calls went unanswered, messages went unreturned. It was, by her own description, a total blackout of information at the exact moment she needed answers the most. When the truth finally reached her, it was not a bloody nose and a little trouble breathing. Vianca had died from her injuries. Here is where this case takes its first troubling turn, and it's the turn that would define the next several years of her mother's life. In the immediate aftermath, local authorities classified Vianca's death as a robbery that had escalated into violence, a break-in gone wrong, a tragic random crime with no target and no motive beyond opportunity. Vianca's mother rejected that explanation almost immediately, and according to later reporting, she had good reason to. There was no clear evidence of forced entry into the home. Whatever was supposedly stolen was never clearly established in a way that matched the injuries Vianca had suffered. And those injuries, according to her mother's public statements over the years, were not consistent with a burglar trying to get past an obstacle and flee. They were described as sustained and concentrated, focused on Vianca's face and head, the kind of violence that speaks to something far more personal than opportunistic theft. Think about that distinction for a moment, because it's the entire foundation of this case. A person breaking into a stranger's home wants one thing: to get in, get something of value, and get out before anyone notices. They are not looking for a prolonged, violent confrontation. The pattern investigators eventually acknowledged in Vianca's case looked nothing like that. It looked targeted. For more than a month after her death, the official classification stayed the same: robbery. Vianca's mother pushed back immediately and did not stop pushing. With public support from the city's then mayor, she eventually succeeded in getting the case reclassified, not as an ordinary crime, but as femicide, meaning Mexican authorities would now be required to investigate it specifically as a gender-motivated killing, under a completely different legal framework, with different protocols and different obligations. That reclassification should have accelerated everything. It didn't. For the better part of 5 years, this case moved at what can only be described as a crawl. Vianca's mother has publicly and repeatedly accused former state officials of mishandling the investigation from its very first hours, of failing to properly secure the scene, failing to preserve evidence, and failing to pursue leads with any real urgency. She fought using every bit of her own legal training to secure something most grieving families never have to consider: the exhumation of her own daughter's remains, so that an independent second forensic examination could finally be performed, because she did not trust the conclusions of the first one. That is not a small thing to do. That is a mother deciding that the only way to get the truth about how her child died is to have her daughter's body dug up years later and examined again from scratch. Think about the strength that takes, and think about what it tells you about how little faith she had left in the system that was supposed to be doing that work for her. For years, her public statements did not stop. Every anniversary of Vianca's death, she gave interviews. She organized public marches. She said directly and on the record that without sustained public pressure, this case would have quietly disappeared into an archive somewhere, unsolved and unremembered. In 2023, there was a moment that looked like real progress. A judge issued an arrest order connected to the case, but that order was later dismissed after a different judge ruled that the evidence presented did not meet proper scientific standards. For a mother who had already waited 5 years, this must have felt like watching the ground open up beneath her feet all over again. And then, in September of 2025, 7 years and 7 months after the night Vianca died, everything changed. Authorities in Quintana Roo announced an arrest. The suspect named by officials was Vianca's own former roommate, the same woman who had made that unsettling, emotionless phone call on the night of the attack. According to the state prosecutor's office, her arrest followed a coordinated operation involving specialized investigators focused on femicide cases working alongside state intelligence police after a judge issued a formal detention order. According to reporting on the arrest, she was given a window of several hours to turn herself in voluntarily before a public detention would take place. And she did surrender. She has since been ordered held in preventive detention while the criminal case against her proceeds through Mexico's court system. Now, here's where we have to be very careful and very fair, because that's what separates a responsible true crime channel from a rumor mill. As of today, she has been formally linked to the criminal process for femicide. That is a serious legal step, but it is not a conviction. Under the law in Mexico and everywhere else that operates under a fair system of justice, she is a woman who has been accused. The determination of guilt belongs to a judge and to the evidence presented in a courtroom, not to headlines and not to any of us watching from the outside. What we can say without speculation is this. For almost 8 years, a mother was told in one form or another to accept an explanation she did not believe. She was met with dismissed evidence, years of institutional delay, and, according to her own public statements, direct efforts to discourage her from continuing to push. And in one of those rare moments where persistence actually outlasts a broken system, a name and a face are now sitting in front of a judge because she refused to stop calling, refused to stop asking questions, and refused to let her daughter's case become just another number in an unsolved file. Vianca Moreno Labastida spent a decade proving to herself that she could build an entire life on her own, far from everything familiar. She came home to be closer to the people who loved her. Instead, her mother spent nearly 8 years fighting a system that seemed determined to make her give up. This case is still moving through Mexico's courts as we're recording this, and we will be following it closely to see where it goes from here. If this story moved you the way it moved us while we were researching it, do 3 things before you leave. Like this video so it reaches more people who need to see it. Drop a comment and tell us what part of this story stuck with you the most. And subscribe to Buried Truth Crime because we post a brand new case every single day, not once a week. And there is always another story out there waiting for someone to keep asking questions until it gets answered. We'll see you in the next one.